Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees. My name's John Dillon. I'm here with Rose.
Hi, guys.
And Martin.
Hey, all.
And Jacob was going to be here, but he has the flu and COVID and leprosy and all the... he doesn't really have leprosy, but he seems to be...
Leprosy sounds biblical.
Yeah, that's why you can throw it out there.
Yeah,
I don't know that he doesn't have it.
That's a good point.
Confirm nor deny.
He was beating on the window a minute ago, so
we locked him out.
We locked the door because I don't want that stuff. You keep it. But things have been exciting here. Martin did the March from Hades. What was it? The Mammoth March?
Mammoth March.
Why is it called a Mammoth March?
It's pretty big. Honestly.
Oh, just because it's...
Yeah. And it's hairy, I think, because it's tough to
That'll
get through
do
it all.
it.
21.8 miles. They broadcast that it's 20, but it's actually longer. Whether you believe it or not, I have it tracked on my phone with other people, too. So it is much longer than they say it is. But you know that sense of like when you really accomplish something big, something maybe you never thought you'd ever do, and it outweighs all the hardship that you had to go through to get to it? Mm-hmm. I don't, because I didn't get that after finishing that.
I was waiting for the drop, man.
It was not it was not worth it all. But we met some new people, and we had a lot of fun with the group that we went with. So it was overall a good experience, but I'm still a little hurt, not ready to sign up next year quite yet.
I mean, nothing says fun like walking.
Over and over and over again. It's hard to walk. Once your feet get bruised, then you're just done for. And then it's just misery.
So from what I understand, and the picture has been painted for me by several people, they got out of their trucks and their Subarus with various hiking accoutrements and lots of staffs and their favorite water bottles. And Martin comes bebopping along like it's 1982 with his headband and his cutoff shirt. And a lady swooned.
Short socks was the worst part because I had the blisters up the ankles. But yeah, I was very unprepared. Pretty much how I come to every podcast. Just very unprepared, but ready to take on the world. And so here we are.
I love it. I love it. Rose, what have you been up to?
Oh, let's see. Well, I did not do any type of hiking this week, but I did do some shopping for books. I buy and sell books, and I found some really nice ones today. I was quite thrilled.
I'm going to start telling people that I buy and sell books. That sounds much better than I have a problem.
I guess you could say that.
I buy and sell books.
I buy and sell books.
I don't sell many of them.
But you've sold one in your life.
Yeah. I had a garage sale once, and a book was sold.
I know that when we were in D.C. a couple weeks ago, we went to Thomas Jefferson's library, the Library of Congress, and he bought and sold books, too. So I'm basically, Thomas Jefferson.
Very presidential of you.
Right, I know.
Way to go, way to go. Well, anyway, we are studying through the intertestamental period, but we haven't quite hit the intertestamental part of that period. We're talking about how we bridge the gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And we've got to the part where everyone has been sent into exile. The northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians. The southern kingdom of Judah was conquered by the Babylonians, and really what we're trying to highlight is that God desired the people of Israel to be one people. They're brothers. They're designed by God to be a family. The high priest carried on his person the stones that each represented the tribes all across Israel. When you read Joshua, they kept making little altars that were made out of 12 stones. There's this emphasis on unity in diversity. But as Satan's kingdom reached into God's plan, what he promoted wasn't unity, but disunity. And so you find that as Satan is trying to stop God's plan, he does so by trying to drive a wedge between the peoples. And we talked about how we can see this as you have the way of Eden and you have the way of Babylon. The way of Eden is when you try to be a tree planted by waters and be a blessing to everyone who's around you. And the way of Babylon really is about manipulating other people to get what you want. And by the time that the story that we're going to look at today comes around, they have been in exile for quite a while. And Daniel has done his thing, and we're kind of moving quickly through this period of history. But God works on the king of Persia's heart to rebuild the temple in Israel. And that may seem like a really random thing for a Gentile king to do, but it actually makes a lot of political sense. There wasn't a lot of unity at times in the Persian Empire. And their kings, their dynasties kind of switched back and forth. And so by allowing the exiles to go back and to rebuild their temple, what he's doing is he's making happy, happy citizens. And they're going to remember that he is their patron, and he's the one who allows them to rebuild and to... Jacob, you're here with all of your sicknesses. That's okay. But what we pretty much see is that he's desiring to create peace in the empire. Now, God is going to use this. Both kingdoms have been destroyed. Israel and Judah broken, their princes scattered. The powers of the nations seem to have destroyed God's plan for Israel. If you were on the evil side, you might say that they had won. It looked like God's promise to Eve had been stopped. David's house was not coming back. And then it did. Even the disgrace of exile, the children of Abraham are not forsaken. Daniel exposes the powers, and even the mighty Nebuchadnezzar is humbled. The prophets still speak, and the persecution intended to stamp out the hope in God seems to have drawn the people closer to him. Now, it's possible that the princes of the darkness were comfortable with this position, but I doubt it. God is great, and they are not. Even the conquest of the kingdoms turned out to be nothing more than God's will manifest on the earth. The princes of the darkness must have been caught off guard when the king of Persia says, "Why don't you go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple?" And suddenly, the guy that he sends back to do it, a man named Zerubabbel, we find out is a descendant of King David. So all of a sudden, it's like the last 100 years haven't happened. And Jerusalem is back on the board, a temple is being rebuilt, and the scion of the house of David is given power in Israel. Zerubabbel is a name that a lot of New Testament Christians don't really think about, but he's a major player in the prophets and in the Old Testament, kind of as a whole. So Zerubabbel, he's the heir of David, and he seems to have arrived out of nowhere, gathering the scattered people of Israel, going around and recruiting people and saying, hey, we're going back to Jerusalem, we're going to rebuild the city, and he leads the tribes, or a bunch of people from the tribes of Benjamin, Levi, and Judah back to Jerusalem. And many people kind of visualize this as like an un-exodus, like everybody went home, and it's really not. It's a couple thousand people. Remember that most of the Jewish people never left Israel. They're still there. Most of the Israelites who were in the northern kingdom, the poorer peoples, they're still there. There's a lot of newer people who've come in, but on the whole, there's an abundance of people still there. And even more people are living in exile. The story of Esther, all that stuff has happened and has been going on, and we find that there are lots and lots of Jewish people who are happily living in exile. That's not bad, it's just the reality. So this is unexpected, to say the least. You have a descendant of David, a prince of the house of David is coming back, and anyone reading the story, not knowing about the coming of Jesus in the Gospels, is going to wonder, is this the Messiah? Is this the promised King of David that's going to come and unite the people? And you have to wonder, what is God up to? Is the dark's plan unraveling? And yes, it is. It's unraveling, and it's wonderful. So let's take a look at kind of how this unfolds. And you're going to see this story most clearly in the book of Zechariah and in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. So let's go to Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 3.
Can I just maybe highlight a little nugget that I think you just said, and I think we pass over so much, when you said the people of the time would to look at this as if this were the Messiah. Right, we're reading this with a hindsight of we know when Jesus comes and what he does.
Right.
And they were thinking that this could happen any minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important, I think, to be able to put yourself not only in the thought process of what they're doing, but in the time frame also of not knowing what's coming in the future. Because we do this all the time. Like, is this guy the Antichrist? Is this guy the end of is this guy whatever? And I think we do the same thing. And if we look at what these guys were doing, which was not trusting in God's plan, you can kind of bring that to our lives today. And so that's just a little nugget. It's not really what we're talking about, but I think it's an interesting
No, I think it's an
process.
important thought, though, because you have this man who's acting very Moses-like. He has the high priest with him. There's Joshua and Zerubbabel. And these two guys are leading thousands of the people out of exile in Babylon back to the promised land, and they're going to rebuild the temple. That would have rung bells for anybody who was familiar with the Torah, anybody who's been thinking, where is the promised king that we were given? Why has the house of David failed us? And they're looking, and all of a sudden, here is the power back in the hands of the people of David. There must have been excitement about this, enough excitement for people to leave their homes and travel all the way back to Jerusalem and rebuild the city. So let's jump into Ezra 1:1-3.
In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing.
So before we jump too far in here, I want to point out that this isn't just something that Cyrus comes up with out of the goodness of his heart. Remember that we're intended to read these stories not just as an earthly story, but also as a spiritual story. The characters are both physical and supernatural. There are beings behind the scenes who are pushing the story along. In this case, it's the Lord himself. He puts it in the heart of the king. He stirs up his spirit. And he says, hey, this is when it's going to come. Now, just spoiler alert, this isn't the Messiah. It's going to happen in his own time. In the New Testament, we get this line, when the fullness of time had come. And so we seem to see, and what I think Zerubbabel does is it shows God is still in control. It's a shot across the bow of the kingdom of the darkness. Be aware, I am not even close to defeated, and you guys need to reckon with what I'm doing because I'm coming for you. I'm going to reclaim the nations. I'm going to send the Messiah. Your kingdom is going to fall, and suddenly they're on the back foot again. So let's keep going. Verse 2.
Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel, he that is God, who is in Jerusalem.
So this is a fulfilled prophecy. This is something that Jeremiah said was going to happen. God has put this in motion ages ago, before the foundations of the world, and it calls him the God who is in Jerusalem. We get this idea, Cyrus is not a follower of the Lord. He's not suddenly had a conversion moment. Instead, he is trying to be a good politician. He's manipulating people, but the Lord is going to use his desires to further his own kingdom.
When we left off last week, and the glory of the Lord came to Babylon.
Yep.
So what's he doing back in Jerusalem?
That's a good question.
All right.
Yeah, you're kind of left wondering, where is he going? What's happening? What is the plan here? I thought we had moved away from Jerusalem and we were moving towards this global thing. And instead we find the temple is back in play. This would have been confusing for the powers of the darkness and frightening too, because it seems that their plan had derailed. And so we have whoever is among you of all the people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And so we have this idea, again, that kind of points to, the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. This is not Cyrus saying, you are the King of Kings, the God of gods, mighty and awesome. This is him recognizing that nations have their own principalities and powers, and he's lumping God in with all the others. Now, God is going to use this to show that he is not anything like the others, that he is great and awesome. And he's going to make this really clear, not just in the story of Ezra, but in the lives of the prophets. A good timeline will help you here. One of the prophets who is an important character in the life of Zerubbabel is a prophet named Haggai. And so his book in chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 20, and we're going to take a look at what God says about Zerubbabel.
The word of the Lord came a second time to Haggai on the 24th day of the month. Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I am about to shake the heavens and the earth, and to overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I am about to destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the nations, and overthrow the chariots and their riders. and the horses and their riders shall go down, every one by the sword of his brother. On that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts.
So remember, these stories exist on two levels, physical and spiritual. And Zerubbabel, an earthly player, is given a glimpse into the supernatural world. Speak to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah. So he's not the king of Judah, but he is the power in Judah. And what God says is, I am about to do what?
Shake the heavens and the earth.
Not just the earth, but the heavens. There is great change that's about to take place. I am coming. The heavens are going to shake, not just the empires, but the powers behind them. And Zerubbabel is going to be like a signet ring, which is a ring. Sometimes it would be a necklace, something that would be worn, and it has a picture on it that represents the king. Remember, all the way back in Genesis, we find that mankind is made to be the image of God. We're to image him. And so what he is saying here is that I am going to lift you up, Zerubbabel, so that people can see me in action on the earth. It's not him saying that Zerubbabel is the Messiah. Instead, he is a sign of the kingdom of God. For I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts. So he's a sign of God's power, God's continued faithfulness both to Israel and to the house of David. Now, Zerubbabel is to me an interesting guy. His name doesn't sound very Jewish. It's got the word Babel in it. He's a guy from Babel. He's apparently, high enough in the king's retinue to be given control of a governorship of a place as far away as Judah. And so this isn't somebody who, Cyrus just leaned out his window. Hey, you random citizen.
It's not like a rags to riches story.
No, it's a riches to riches story. Remember, God was blessing his people in exile. Jeremiah talks about this. He says, you're going to go into exile, and I don't want you to overthrow the government. I want you to plant gardens. I want you to thrive and be at home and really pray for the peace of the cities where you find yourselves. Wherever you go, be a blessing.
I should have done a little bit more studying on this timeline here, but are we at the end of the 70 years that they went into exile, and they knew it would be 70 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And is this around the same time that Nehemiah is going back to rebuild the walls?
Yeah, so that's going to come after.
That comes after this. All
Yep.
right. It's been a while since I've studied all this, and I just kind of lost track.
Yeah, so Zerubbabel really, I like Zerubbabel, but he gets skipped over because Nehemiah's story is so interesting. It's one of those moments where, you're going to understand later when you see the end of Zerubbabel's story. It doesn't fit well, and so many people just kind of breeze past it.
Well, Nehemiah has the whole book of the Bible, and Zerubbabel does not. So that might be why we know his story a little more.
Yeah, well, he's in several books. It's just that there's not one called the Book of Zerubbabel. Right. No, I follow you. But go ahead.
I got a kind of a question here. When you're looking at these last two passages, and a lot of this has to do with the people that are in charge, like the government. But it really matches up with what Paul says, that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers that are behind it. But then I'm also thinking about praying for your leaders because God has placed them there. When I think of Cyrus, king of Persia, now being utilized as a tool to help God, even though he's not on God's side, God is almost manipulating the chess pieces to work for his good. He knows that Cyrus is going to act in a way that's going to better himself.
Right.
And it's a political move for Cyrus, but it's a spiritual move for God in the same way. And I think the next passage is kind of the same way. It's Zerubbabel being used in a way that seems like a political move for him and for some of these rulers and governors.
Yeah, if you read this on just a purely political, earthly lens, it makes sense. You can see how this would happen. And then if you read it from a supernatural lens, you can also see, there's a bigger story at play here. And we've seen this before. God moved Nebuchadnezzar to come and to conquer. The Lord has done this before. His will gets done. If he wills it, it's going to happen. And so it's this moment of, all right, I don't really understand, God, what you're doing. if you're bringing the people back to Israel, why aren't you calling everyone to go back? Most of the exiles stay in exile. This isn't Moses leading the people through the wilderness, although it has kind of notes of that. It's even up into Jesus's day, the people still believed themselves to be in exile. It's but on the nice, neat dispensational charts, a lot of times people would be like, and the exile ended 70 years, boom, done, line through that.
But it's almost like when people were experiencing this, not being in power, like the average Joe like us here, there's probably a lot of times where they're like, God, what is going on? Like, why is this guy being able to call the shots? Why is this guy, telling me where my money goes? Why is this guy saying how much I pay in taxes? Why is this guy? And I just look at how we are going through today. I mean, you see the commercials, you get text messages of vote for me, vote for you, vote for everybody in between. And there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that about who is in quote-unquote control in our country and who's really in control of creation. And I think that is something that we should be looking at. Again, if we're putting ourselves into the lens of the people that are going through this, I think we can see a lot of similarities to today.
There is a little bit of that given in that text back in, I think it was verse 2, maybe verse 3, where Cyrus says, anyone that wants to go can go. And so you can imagine the people's gathered around their tables. Are we moving back to Jerusalem or are we staying here? What does the business look like? They're thriving where they are. They've become parts of these communities. They've maintained their Jewish identity, but this is home now for several generations.
Right.
And now a decision has to be made. Are we going back or are we staying here?
And a decision that could probably ostracize you if you make it one way or another. Within groups of people, within your friends, within whatever. And it was a decision that they had to face. And it's like, man, that you can see how these people were real life people making the same decisions that we're making today. And I think that brings these stories to life a little bit more. It's not just, these people in some faraway land had to trust in God. It's like, no, these are people that had the same problems, the same struggles, the same decision-making things. And ultimately, are they going to rely on God to provide for them and to be their God, or are they going to try to do it themselves?
Yeah.
And that's the name of the podcast. But you can see it in everything that we bring up. That's what it is which tree are you going to choose? Which decision are you going to make? And it's just one more where I find myself struggling with this a lot, especially now. And it's like, am I going to follow this guy? Am I going to vote for this guy? Am I going to, put a sign in my yard or not? And those are just political options. But these things are brought into your life for a reason. And so it's an opportunity for you to show allegiance to who you want to show allegiance to. And it doesn't mean red or blue. It doesn't mean this or that. It means, do you follow and trust in God, and do you want to get closer to Him?
Right. It's about pursuing wisdom. Do you see a path that brings glory to the Lord and goodness to the community around you? And if you do, do that. If there's multiple ones, pick one and trust that the Lord will guide your steps. Like sometimes we're spoiled for good options. And that's kind of what we see here. On the earthly lens, you don't get a ton of information. How did the word go out? Were there flyers? Was there recruiting drives? It just says they came, because this book is talking about the supernatural concept that God has rebirthed the hope of Jerusalem out of the brokenness where the temple used to be. The Scion of David has stepped forward, and power is once again in the hands of the people of the house of David. Nobody saw that coming.
So another thing, I know you said this isn't a Moses leading them out of Egypt type scenario, but
it's like it, but it isn't.
It's not one-to-one, but there's still some language here in verse 21 of Haggai 2. He says, I am about to destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the nations and overthrow the chariots and their riders, and the horses and their riders shall go down, everyone by the sword of his brother. Those are some of the same words that are used in the song of Moses, Miriam, Moses, after they come out. The horse and the rider, he is turned into a sea. So I wonder if he's kind of hearkening back to that a little bit. And then also up there where that King Cyrus says, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. And down here, he says, I'm going to destroy the strength of the kingdom of the nations. can you make some kind of a connection there for me? Like, has Cyrus been given like the territorial spirit kingdoms of the earth, or just the
he thought so.
political kingdoms of the earth?
Yeah, the kings of Persia were literally ruling everything they came across. It wasn't just a territory. They were an empire in the proper sense of the word. And what is about to happen is the twilight of the Persian Empire. As a matter of fact, the old world that we're used to reading about in the Old Testament is about to come to a screeching halt. And the Greeks are going to come, and the Hellenization of the world is going to rewrite everything. And the way the world operates, the old powers, the way people think, what it means to be a powerful city or an important person, all of that's going to shift. And God is telling them, before any of that happens, my temple will be back in play. I am going to show you the world is going to rattle, but you are not. I'm going to make sure that my will and my kingdom is going to come out on top of this. The kingdom of God is an unstoppable thing. And Zerubbabel is the signet of it, the sign of it. The fact that he came back is a sign that God had not forgotten the people. And I think the darkness took note of that. They must have been afraid of what was happening. And they would have tried to stop it. They, if they were following, the way of Babylon, the concept of a king with no earthly throne, or a shepherd who would lay down his life for the sheep, that would have never entered into their minds. But Jesus' coming is being prepared here. The Lord is going to bring about the Messiah. He's going to put an end to the way the world had been. And we see this. Hang on, someone's phone is ringing.
Jeremy, he's not even here. He's the most popular guy here.
Okay. Do you want to stop?
Keep it rolling, John, me and you.
All right, you and me. Let's go to Ezra 4, 1 through 5.
Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' houses and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Ashur-haddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here."
Okay, so we're going to stop there. These are the Samaritans. These are the people of Israel, and they're ethnically Jewish. These are the people who've been living there. They've married into these other families, but they are worshiping the God of Israel. And this kind of gets expounded a little bit more in the book of Nehemiah, but they're not offering to help just because they're nice. There seems to be here a desire by the powerful rulers of Samaria and the area around them. Let us help you build it so that we can have a hand in claiming the glory. This isn't something that God did. This is something that we did. This isn't something that was from nowhere. It had to happen because it had people like us supporting it. And they wanted to put their name on it. They wanted to be able to reap in the benefits of this. And Zerubbabel rightly sees through their plan here. And he tells them, no, this is not happening. We love you guys, love you bunches. Go over to Samaria and you be you, and we're going to do our thing here. Look at verse 3.
But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the rest of the heads of the fathers' houses in Israel said to them, "You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus and the king of Persia has commanded us."
So their response is wise. This is not something for you to come in and to manipulate. This is something that God has told us to do. The king asked, we're going to respond. It isn't a cry to go out and to attack Samaritans, but it is this idea that the world is not back together. The tribes aren't just hunky-dory with each other. There's still a lot of the way of Babylon happening here. And so let's look at verse 4.
Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build, and bribed counselors against them to frustrate their purpose. all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
Now that reads really polite, really nice. It says that he discouraged the people of Judah. And on the flannel graph boards when I was a kid, like there were people off in the distance going, "Don't build it. You don't need to do that." This is through physical violence. Go ahead. Come out here and pick up the rocks and see if you come out. The idea here is everything is dangerous. Not only that, but they bribe counselors back in Persia. They're saying, "Listen, we heard that those guys you sent out to Jerusalem, they're planning a rebellion." And that happened a lot in that area. There was actually a really big rebellion that takes place. And the Persian Empire isn't always as in charge as it likes to think it is. But they're out there talking trash. They have paid off the right people to get to the king and to say, "Listen, what you're seeing here as just a religious thing is really a secret rebellion. You need to be aware you cannot trust the house of David." And so we're kind of left with this idea that Israel is surrounded. There are enemies all around him. And I can't help but think of Psalm 22. A Davidic psalm that's ultimately fulfilled by Christ on the cross. And it says, "Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like ravening and a roaring lion." This idea of the darkness is all around us. Now, Bashan has real demonic connections, Mount Hermon, all that stuff. But there's this idea that it isn't just people that are surrounding them. It's the powers of the darkness who want this to fail. And they're going to wield their power to make it fail. So the Samaritans and the Gentiles want to claim ownership. They want to manipulate it to their own advantage. A good story to remember this. Do you remember when Abraham rescues Lot and all of the people of Sodom?
Sure.
And then the king of Sodom is like, "Hey, Abraham, let me give you gifts." And Abraham says, "No, you're not going to give me anything. I don't need anything from you." And it wasn't a sign of hate to the king of Sodom. It was a way of saying, "You didn't hire me to do this job. You don't get to claim that you rescued the people. This is something that I did to rescue my family member. The Lord led me here." And so the same thing is happening here. And so it's the work. It can't be made to serve them, and so they're going to destroy it. If this isn't something I can manipulate, then they want to stop it. And that is going to set the bar for really the next several hundred years of Jewish and Samaritan relationships.
And John, I have a question about it, because you mentioned when we read verse 3 that Zerubbabel's response was a wise response. Somehow he understood that these people were trying to come in and take credit where it wasn't due to them. And so he puts an end to it. But by means of physical harm and manipulation of these counselors to frustrate the people, to lie to them, to make sure that they don't come and try to help build with that. That seems a lot to me like him taking matters into his own hands to make sure that something is
well, he does take matters into his own hands in the sense that he's been asked to do a job and he's going to do it. The bricks aren't going to lay themselves, the stones aren't going to rise, and he's got people moving around in dangerous territory, so he defends them. But it's not Zerubbabel setting traps. It's the Samaritans and the Gentiles around him. More or less what they say is, "Let us help you build it. Let us put our name on it. This temple brought to you by the kingdom of Samaria." Or the province of Samaria, and they want to put their name on it. You've probably seen how ancient cultures have stones with giant names on them. This was donated to the people of the city by such. That's what they wanted. They wanted this to become a testament to their houses rather than a testament to the house of David. The original temple was built by Solomon. Right? It's the house of David. It was connected intimately to the power of the house of David. This one's going to be the same. There's not an instance here where Jeroboam's descendants get to come in and say, "But you couldn't have done it without us," right? We're the ones who really got this done. And so it's interesting because you can really see their heart, because instantly after they're told you can't help us build it, they then want to murder the people who are building it. it's not very hard to spot someone who hates you, usually. And I think Zerubbabel was well aware, these are not my friends. And he's a court official. He's not new to this. He's been swimming with the big fish in the Prince of Persia or the King of Persia's court for quite a while. He knows how to operate in a successful way.
At the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned how the overall design for Israel was for them to be together, was for unity. And you've been preaching a lot about it at Stillwater, this unity. But when it seems to me, when people are arguing, especially multiple Christians that are arguing, they both play the role of Zerubbabel in their arguments, that this is the way it needs to go, and you're just trying to put your name on what God told me to do. And I think, just not to derail us into some application, but I feel like that's something that is a wise thing that we have to be able to decipher, is like, are we trying to make this happen because we want it, or are we trying to act as Zerubbabel is? Because he's doing a lot of things that God didn't tell him to do. I mean, God didn't tell him to threaten to kill people or to use physical violence to prevent them. Like, that was stuff that he probably came up with. God wasn't like, hit that guy because he's coming this way. Like, he was working on his own free will to do that. But he was somehow in relationship with God to the point where he knew that he needed to prevent these people from putting their name on it.
Yeah, Zerubbabel's not trying to kill people. He's not laying traps. He's acting in a defensive manner. You're going to see this later in Nehemiah, where he's going to have the workers working with one hand and armed in the other hand. And so it isn't that he's simply trying to do that. But this is also special. This is the temple of the Lord. It's connected to this long story, and not just everyone has the right to do this. As Americans, we hate this.
Right.
No one in the world could be more important than I am, and you're lucky to have me. Kind of a mentality that we wield, and it's wrong. There's a humbleness that ought to be a mark of a follower of Christ. And these fellows up in Samaria, this is Sanballat and Tobiah, and we know their names from other places. They're not nice guys. But they recognize there's a real threat here. If a temple goes up in Jerusalem, Jerusalem becomes a major player again.
So question, when Jesus sits and talks with the woman at the well, and she says that you worship in Jerusalem and we worship on Mount Gerizim.
Gerizim.
Yeah. Where were these people that are talking to them? Where were they worshiping? Because they say, let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. Where were they doing that?
Yeah, that is the entire topic of the next podcast.
Oh, preview.
Preview, yeah. The answer to that is when Sanballat discovers what's happening, he builds his own temple. Before that, they're worshiping in the high places. They're kind of just making it up as they go. But Sanballat is going to set up a rival temple to the one that's built in Jerusalem. And so let's keep going. Let's go to the next verse, to Artaxerxes the king.
To Artaxerxes the king, your servants, the men of the province beyond the river, send greeting. And now be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from you to have us gone to Jerusalem, they are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are finishing the walls and repairing the foundations. Now be it known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls finished, they will not pay tribute, custom, or toll, and the royal revenue will be impaired. Now, because we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not fitting for us to witness the king's dishonor, therefore we send and inform the king.
Did you notice what they call Jerusalem?
The
a wicked
and rebellious city.
Yeah, almost like Babylon is how they're describing Jerusalem. And in many instances they are, but in this instance they're lying. They're trying to present God's will as a threat to the earthly powers.
These guys just sound smarmy.
They are.
They really just, yeah.
They claim this is a rebellion. Zerubbabel is out there because he was asked to. He didn't decide to go out there. The king sent him. He's the governor. And so these people are lying about him. This has got to be hard for him. I mean, everyone's against him. The whole world around him seems to be opposed to him. This province beyond the river is talking about the Tigris, the Euphrates River. It's one of the names for this bigger piece of real estate out there. And so he has people that he answers to, Zerubbabel does. And these men are lying. They've been paid off. Now, Haggai is going to give us more information about this. Let's go to Haggai 2, 4 through 5.
Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, declares the Lord. Be strong, O Joshua, son of Jezadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares the Lord. Work, for I am with you, declares the Lord of hosts. According to the covenant that I made with you when you came out of Egypt, my spirit remains in your midst. Fear not.
There's that moment again. It's like strong bulls have surrounded me, the bulls of Bashan. The darkness swirls around me, but God is with you. His spirit remains in your midst. He left Jerusalem, but he has never left the people. And this is what God is saying. Even if the world is against you, I am with you. And he tells Zerubbabel, be strong. And he tells the high priest, Joshua, be strong. And the people, do the work. For I am with you, declares the Lord of ranks, the God of armies, the Lord of hosts. And this is cool. He says, I was with you the first time you left. When you went up out of Egypt, I was there. And so the exiles have two leaders, one of the house of David and one of the house of Moses. You have a Levite and the king or the heir of the kingdom of Judah. And he more or less says, hey, God is with you, Emmanuel. Be strong and of good courage. It makes me think of Joshua's statement, I don't know what cause others are going to take, but as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. This is more than human politics. This is seen in the human politics, but this is the darkness surrounding the work of God to stop it. And what we find is that God is the one that is going to bring it to its fulfillment. Zechariah chapter 4, verses 1 through 14, gives us a vision about Zerubbabel and Joshua. Let's take a look.
And the angel who talked with me came again and woke me like a man who is awakened out of his sleep. And he said to me, What do you see? I said, I see, and behold, a lampstand, all of gold, with a bowl on the top of it, and 7 lamps on it, with 7 lips on each of the lamps that are on the top of it. And there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on its left.
So this is the language of prophecy. This is the language of poetry, symbolism. There aren't really 2 trees and a great big golden candlestick, but this is representing something. In prophetic visions, a literal reading won't help you much. This isn't just God telling you something he saw on vacation. This is him preaching, showing, not telling. And you are reading the language of mysteries and symbols when you read prophecy. And so the stories and the symbols of the past are woven into the present and the future. So the symbols at work in this prophecy given to us by Zechariah are those of the Garden of Eden and of the temple, which in itself was an expression of the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. And so we have this many-branched lamp, like the one that would have stood in the temple, in the tabernacle. We call this the menorah. And it's filled with light. It's being constantly filled from the trees. There are how many trees?
2.
2 trees. Oh, shocking. Mm-hmm. And what it's doing is it's saying, listen, this is the story that has been happening since the beginning. And it's expressing itself again now. There's a great lamp, a tree of light, and it's filled with oil from above. The flanking trees seem to be pouring oil into the bowls. This is an ongoing anointing. And we've talked about how water symbolizes life and growth and all those things. And oil is like a heavenly water. And so the idea of pouring oil over something was to hallow it, to make it special, sacred. And that's what's happening here. The trees are pouring out their oil onto these things. And so you're supposed to read this and wonder, what does this have to do with what's happening in Jerusalem? The temple is being rebuilt. And so I can kind of see the branches of the menorah. That part makes sense to me. But what are these trees doing here? There's not trees up on the Temple Mount. What's happening? So let's pick it up in verse 4.
And I said to the angel who talked with me, What are these, my Lord? Then the angel who talked with me answered and said to me, Do you not know what these are? I said, No, my Lord. Then he said to me, This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts.
All right, we're going to stop there. It's probably the best line in the book of Zechariah. And so Zechariah looks at this and he says, I don't really know what I'm looking at. It's a little confusing. We've got trees pouring oil. There's this big menorah. And he says, what are these? And the angel says, oh, you don't know what these are? Dum-dum. Let me explain it to you. And he says, nothing about it. He doesn't explain it. He said, here's a word for Zerubbabel. This is the same guy who is rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. And here's the message. I'm with you. It's not you who's going to get this job done. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it. It's not by might. It's not by power. But it's by my spirit, says the God of ranks, says the Lord of hosts. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain, and he shall bring forward the top stone amid shouts of grace, grace to it. So he asks the obvious question. What exactly are we looking at here, Lord? Because it's not making a lot of sense to me. I would like to know maybe a timeline, maybe a chart, a couple heads up on some of these ambushes that are being set. Instead, God answers with a prophecy to Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is seen as overcoming the high places, placing a great stone on top of the mountain, raising it even higher. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 talks about a stone that the builders rejected, and it has become the cornerstone. Let's look at the next verse.
Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also complete it. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. For whoever has despised the day of small things shall rejoice, and shall see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel.
So Zechariah gives a promise that Zerubbabel has started the work, and Zerubbabel will finish the work. That's not the kingdom. That's not the reestablishment of Judah. That's not independence from Persia. That's the rebuilding of the temple. And he says, whoever despised the day of small things shall rejoice to see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. Now, the plumb line, anyone who's built things understands probably what a plumb line is, something that's in line, a plumb meaning that it's not crooked. And this vision, this image is rich throughout the prophets anytime someone is building something. In particular, you're going to notice this in the book of Revelation when John is measuring the city and he has a plumb line. It also connects the temple's construction to the house of David. This isn't just some temple that got built. This is David's family coming back. And Martin, your conversation earlier, he doesn't do this just because he's the super politician. He does this because he inspired the people to come with him, and everyone is taking up and building this. But really, the moving spirit behind this is the Lord. It's not that Zerubbabel is this awesome politician, and so the Samaritans are just going to come running back to Judah and say, brothers, let's be one. It's not that he's so clever and righteous that the king of Persia is going to say, I don't believe these rumors about you, Zerubbabel. You're too awesome. Instead, he's saying there is a bigger story happening than just the life of one man. It is not by might. It's not by power, but my spirit is going to see this completed. And he's not just talking about the rebuilding of the temple.
Well, earlier we had read, too, that he says, my spirit remains in your midst, fear not. I love that verse anyway, and tying it into what we just read, not by might, power, but by my spirit. It's always going to be him working in us. It's
when I
not
read
gonna
this
be...
story, when I think of Zerubbabel, I really think of the presence of God in the midst of trouble. Because Zerubbabel is given a really hard job, and he's not admired for it. He's looked down on, he's talked bad about, and he's even today not famous. He's not someone that you probably hear a lot of sermons about. He probably wasn't in your top 5 baby names when you were picking biblical names. But the Lord was with him. He uses him. He's like a signet on the hand of the Lord, a sign of what God is doing. And so this prophecy is given to Zechariah that the temple is coming. The trees of the garden are here. The presence of God is here. The oil is pouring. The lights are on the candles. Let's keep looking.
And I think it's interesting. I think something that we miss a lot, especially in the Western culture, I guess, but for whoever has despised the day of small things shall rejoice. And I think what you're listing off there with him being super politician and being the guy that everybody's going to follow, that's the small things. If we're rejoicing in the small things of fame and power and political gain, then you're going to despise when it comes to fruition. But if we despise all that other junk, you're going to be pretty happy when this all comes to pass.
The way of Babylon says, accumulate power and might and force your will to get things done. The way of the kingdom of God exalts the humble. It is the undoing of Babel, his way of Eden. This idea of support and love and compassion, of loving your enemies, of being a resistance to the darkness. It's another way altogether. And Zerubbabel is living this. He isn't running around killing people, hunting people. He's not the violent one. Instead, what you find is that he's responding to this faithfully. I think that's a big idea.
What's really neat is it's just another example of Zerubbabel allowing a paradigm shift. He's allowing transformative power to run into his veins and shift the way that he views the world. And that's something that we can't do by ourselves. That's something that comes through submission and through the grace or the spirit that gets stirred up through the Holy Spirit for us, but through God's power that can change us in the way that we view things. You can go down the science route and say that it actually changes the physiological shape of your mind and stuff, but it really does change the way that you view the world. And that's something that you have to experience. We can tell you all day long that Jesus can change your life, but until you allow it to happen and you start acting differently than you did before, it's something that when you look back, you're like, wow, I'm appalled at how I used to live, even when I was a quote-unquote Christian. But Zerubbabel has this. And I think that's what we need to really take from this. This is what I've been trying to take from all of these stories, is the paradigm, or what was the word my dad used in Sunday school a long time ago, when it was just, they knew what was going on. They allowed for it. And how did they get to that? I think it's the submission to the Spirit. It's the listening to what God is asking them to do. And that's not just saying, give me what I need, give me what I need. It's changing your actions to align with him so you can know what he's telling you to do. That comes from submission to him. That comes from prayer. That comes from fasting. That comes from an active lifestyle trying to get closer to him. And it's so neat when you see someone like this that you've never heard of before, and he plays an integral role because he allowed that to happen in his life.
So we kind of assume that, Zerubbabel did these things. God made these prophecies about him. Therefore, he must get the glory. He must be the next big name. And it's interesting that Zerubbabel is not. He kind of fades away in the story. And there's a humility to that. There's a sense in which we're not working for accolades in this world, but in the kingdom of God. Where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. Now, Zechariah has seen this vision, and he's not content just with, hey, tell Zerubbabel this. Like, he's like, yeah, but what am I looking at here? I need to know a little bit more. So let's keep reading here. The 7 are the eyes of the Lord.
The 7 are the eyes of the Lord, which range through the whole earth. Then I said to him, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and the left of the lampstand? And a second time I answered and said to him, what are these 2 branches of olive trees, which are beside the 2 golden pipes from which the golden oil is poured out? He said to me, do you not know what these are? I said, no, my Lord. Then he said, these are the 2 anointed ones, son of fresh oil, who stand by the Lord of the whole earth.
Yeah, that phrase there, the 2 anointed ones, really means these are the sons of oil, the sons of fresh oil. And so what are these trees? Well, in the Garden of Eden, we famously see the 2 trees, and we've talked quite a bit about the presence of trees throughout the story. They become a symbol. They become a picture. They become a way of talking about the Garden of Eden, even of human beings or spiritual beings. And here, these trees seem to be more than just trees. They seem to be people, or perhaps ideas. And it's not answered clearly. It's left with a bit of mystery. That's how prophecy works. It has a past, a present, and a future application. And so who are these anointed ones, literally the sons of fresh oil? Well, in ancient Israel, there would have been two anointed men. The first person to be anointed would be the high priest. Every time you have a new high priest, he is anointed. And every time you get a new king, he is anointed. And so when Zerubbabel comes back to rebuild the city, who is it that is his right-hand man? It's Joshua, the high priest. And if you read through the book of Zechariah, there's a really cool courtroom scene where he's on trial, Joshua, the high priest, and the Lord clothes him and declares him righteous. But who are these two people who are standing in the will of God? Well, we've kind of seen that God often sends out champions onto the field in pairs. You got Adam and Eve, Moses and Aaron, David and Jonathan, Elijah's. Even Jesus would send out his disciples in pairs. Paul has a traveling companion all the time. You read the book of Revelation, and there's a famous two witnesses who are there. And so you can apply this at multiple times and in different ways, but when Zechariah is getting this vision, the two men on the scene are Joshua and Zerubbabel. The trees are to point you back that they are standing in the role of an ongoing war against the darkness. God has brought the people back. The temple is going up again. We are reaching another level of the conflict between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of darkness. And the two men that God has placed here to stand for righteousness are Zerubbabel and Joshua. Ezra is going to give us a little bit more. Let's jump into chapter 5.
Now the prophets, Haggai and Zechariah.
How many prophets?
2.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God that is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them.
Now, this is unusual because typically the prophets do not support the political people or the high priests. In general, the high priests and the prophets locked horns about power. But in this instance, when Zerubbabel and Joshua bring the people back and they're rebuilding the temple, there's a unity of brotherhood. It starts there in Jerusalem. And from Jerusalem to Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth. What you're seeing here is a glimpse of gospel. This is how beautiful it is when brothers dwell together in unity.
Maybe that's what the plumb line is that Zerubbabel was holding all along.
You're going to find this concept, and it's just rich in imagery. The prophets and the king, and well, not the king, all right, the governor, and the priest, they're together. They're standing united against the enemies of God. Let's keep going. Look into verse 6. Now, this one has some hard names, so just make up as best a pronunciation as you can.
Verse 13?
Yes.
Is that where we are? Okay. Then according...
hang on. This is Ezra 6:13.
All right. Then according to the word sent by Darius the king, Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shebthar-Bozenai, and
Obviously.
Yes, and their associates did with all diligence what Darius the king had ordered. And the elders of the Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo.
We're going to pause there. And so when you're reading the book of Ezra, and this is kind of weird for Bible readers because we like things to all be in one place. The story of Zechariah and the story of Haggai overlaps with the story of Ezra. Even though they're not right next to each other in your Bible, these stories connect with each other. And that's why we've been in these places. I'm not just cherry-picking verses out of places, that they are part of this story. Keep going.
They finished their building by decree of the God of Israel and by decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king.
He did it. The temple is back.
He did it. Everybody breathe.
Yeah. This didn't look like it was going to get done. And suddenly it's been finished under one try at this. There weren't like 12 different governors sent out there, lots of different architects used. there's a unity in Jerusalem again. This hasn't been there for a very long time. And suddenly, we find that things look a little dicey for the darkness. There is a major piece back on the board. Look at verse 16.
And the people of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the returned exiles celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God of Israel, as it is written in the book of Moses.
So the world was watching. The Samaritans are watching. The Judeans are watching. The peoples around them are aware that this is supernatural warfare. And they're watching God bless his people. And as they continued the work, their faithfulness was remarked upon. It got done. And now they're rejoicing at the temple. They begin to make offerings at the temple. This is not as great as Solomon's offerings. His are really extravagant.
Is there a verse, maybe not in Ezra, maybe it's a little further on, where some of the older people wept when they saw the temple because it wasn't the former glory that it had been? Is that this temple that's just been rebuilt?
Yep.
Okay. And is that, which book is that in? Are we going to touch on that? Or
we are going to touch on it later, but I'm going to say, listen, I don't think it was worth weeping about.
Well, I didn't say it was.
I mean,
did.
when we look back, that temple, as nice as it was filled with idols. It was a mess by the end, and so they're judging the book by the cover, and saying, well, it doesn't look as pretty, so it must not be as great. And the offerings that are given are very generous, but they're not kingly in the sense of Solomon's great gifts. But take a look. How many offerings are given here?
700.
700 sacrifices.
That was some fast math. I was still working on 100 plus 200.
It's in the outline. I just read it.
Excellent. Yes.
A little further down.
7, like the branches of the menorah. This is a symbol of unity, of God's presence. That's a specific number that's given to have a meaning. And it's followed up by a separate set of offerings.
12. I got
Good
that.
job,
yeah,
girl.
I know.
Yeah, you're on
I
it.
can do math.
One for each tribe. The Samaritans, they're not just Gentiles, they're Israel. The offering is made that the temple is the place. God's presence is here. This is Israel's place. So if a descendant of David was building a temple in Jerusalem, the powers of darkness have to stop this. They tried through violence. It didn't work. They tried through lies. It didn't work. And so they come up with another plan. They're going to bring their own prince, a prince of the northern tribes, to build a rival temple in the old kingdom of northern Israel. Not 2 trees, but 2 temples. Sanballat, the son of the displaced nobility of Israel, is going to return and take up governorship of Samaria. Now, the temple was standing in Jerusalem, but Zerubbabel's not going to live to enjoy it. Scripture doesn't say what happened to him, but he seems to disappear back to Babylon, as though his job was done and the king recalled him. And you can imagine the darkness breathing a heavy sigh of relief. Whew, that was scary. But God's not done with this story. He's not done. Zerubbabel may be removed from it, but the temple is there. The house of David was powerless again, and a great threat had returned. But could this revival take root? Could this temple really make a difference in the lives of what was going on? Yes, it is going to make a difference. It is going to reset the stage, not in the way that everybody thinks, but it's going to be unexpectedly important. And so I think that I want to kind of end with this thought. Zerubbabel is not lifted up as Messiah. He humbly disappears. We're not sure if he's arrested and dragged back, or maybe he's just brought back and given another job, but he's gone. Sanballat, though, has figured out that he has to do something. if he is going to maintain power in Samaria, something's got to be done. There's another temple that's going to be built, and it's going to create a massive divide between the Jewish people and the Samaritans. This is a story that's going to end at the cross, and Jesus' proclamation of gospel to Jerusalem, to Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. It's a story about how God is great, powerful, and awesome. He's the King of kings, the God of gods, mighty and awesome.